Hey, welcome to Select Arcane. The weather is starting to cool off and winter is unfortunately on its way. The leaves haven't turned yet, but it's getting rainier by the day. And speaking of the weather, this is a project that you can do on a rainy day. Jennifer Buxton of the Brainier blog came up with a great little prop that could be made very easily in an afternoon. In a small town not too far away from me, these little libraries are at almost every house. I'm not kidding. It's a miracle the town actually has its own real library. And they're so abundant because you can easily find the plans to build one for free online. This specific one I found from scoutlife.com. I'll link the website down below so you can find the plans easily. So, let's get started. You really don't need a lot of things to get started for this project. It's quite simple and easy. I'm posting the material list on screen right now. I got all of these materials at the craft store. It seems that in my area, Michael's is no longer selling wood, and Home Depot is no longer carrying such small sizes, so it was actually kind of hard to find. You can also check Amazon. There's a simple trick when making scaled props. Any of your measurements should be divided by the scale you want to go down to. So right now we're going to do traditional scale, which is 1/9 scale. So you divide all of your measurements by 9. That's it. Simple, right? If you have a classic scale, you divide everything by 12 because classic is Dollhouse scale, 1/12 scale. After planning out your new scaled measurements, simply trace out your pattern on the wood with a pencil and ruler. As you can see, I have to use a meter stick because I don't know where my actual ruler is, so measurements from here on out get a little bit weird on my part. This is definitely not so much a tutorial as it is just an entertainment video, so please take all of these measurements and the final look with a grain of salt. Using a very sharp exacto knife or box cutter, very carefully score along the lines you created with your pencil. Do not use too much pressure and just lightly go over your lines over and over again with your knife, because too much pressure will make it harder to control. So your knife might slip out of your hand, you might hurt yourself, or your cut might get really crooked and mess up the whole piece. Just take your time. And the nice thing about basswood or balsa wood is that you can just snap it off after you've scored it. It leaves a relatively clean line, and don't worry if it's messy because we're going to sand it anyways. I do not recommend that you use scissors because that will split the wood. While cutting out all of your pieces, label them with what they are with pencil. Don't worry, it's not going to show up on the final project, but it will certainly keep track of everything you just cut out so you don't get confused. Using sandpaper or a sanding sponge, sand down every single piece that you've cut out. And I mean every single one. Be diligent. You don't want splinters, you don't want anything poking out, and this will even out the edges in case you messed up like I did. After everything's sanded, make sure that they're not dusty, and now we can start gluing. I'm using a toothpick because it's handy right now, but you can use whatever you like for this. Add a generous amount of Elmers Glue All to your wood piece that you're gluing together. I started with the floor of the library where I added glue, and started with the door frame. It's basically the front of the library. In retrospect, I really should have started with the sides and then the back to really make it more stable, and then lastly I would have done the door frame. Live and let learn. Separately, I attach the roof pieces together and hold those pieces together with your fingers for at least 45 seconds. This part is a little bit tedious and a little bit boring, so put on a show. I was watching The Simpsons while making this. And I had actually split the gable piece, which I'm just gonna salvage and fix it up later anyway, so it's okay. Before I put the roof on, I also added a shelf. I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing to do, but once I put the roof on, I wasn't so sure about it anymore. I also reinforced the entire box with more Elmer's glue, just to make sure it was completely stable. When I cut out the door piece, I actually split the wood, which was a bit of a pain, but it's okay because you can actually reinforce it using paper. Simply cut some strips, and glue them down onto the door frame. I actually only split one side, but I'm actually going to be reinforcing all of the sides just to make sure it's nice and secure. I also apply glue over top of the paper. You're not going to see this at the end anyways after we paint it. At this point, I thought the most logical thing to do was to start decorating. I think I just really looked forward to it in the beginning anyways, so I really wanted to get started. I decided to go with a nice, simple color palette, and I actually really wanted to use something different. I have these cool Japanese papers that I got at a craft store, and I really wanted to incorporate that into the design. First, I painted the box a light teal color, and I decided to paint the roof an off-white. I left the roof kind of as is just because it's kind of like it's made of plywood, and it's nice and simple and homemade. I painted the door frame a really pretty gold to accent the library and to match the nice gold leaf that was swirling all the way around it. But we'll return to the door and how to attach that later because I was still trying to work that out at this point. Next, I cut up my Japanese paper in the same pattern as the instructions, and I started laying it down using this decoupage glue. You can also use Mod Podge, it's the exact same thing. And I carefully laid it down and made sure it was nice and clean looking. This actually hid the gable seams really well where I snapped the wood, and I was actually very fortunate that this worked out really well. Next up is the post that the box actually sits on. I mean, it's supposed to be anchored into the ground after all. I used my doll Farah as kind of a point of reference of how tall to make this little library. I mean, when you walk up to it, it should be okay for kids and adults to use, so I want something in the middle. But then again, this is also a horse prop, so you want to make sure that the rider can reach down and get a book, right? So I settled on a 4-inch post. I'm using a Japanese hand pull saw in lieu of my exacto knife just because I have it, but you can totally use an exacto knife for this because the dowels are very soft. I decided to start gluing and hope for the best, and it wasn't really working out, so I added some extra supports using glue as well. And I whittled down the wood to make the supports flush with the post. And then I came up with the idea that really should have been thought up beforehand when I started the whole project. I cut out a square for the base, and I cut out a square inside of that so I could fit the post inside of it, and I glued. This created a really secure base, and I really wish I had done that with the bottom of the library to begin with. I painted the post the same off-white as the roof just to match, and then I painted the ground brown because we're also going to add some gamer's grass on top with flowers. This will add a bit of realism and hide that ugly base. Next is that annoying door. I've had the biggest problem with trying to attach this to the little library. I tried using the Elmers Glue All, but metal and wood just don't stick together, so I had to bring out the big guns and use Gorilla Glue. It sort of works, and I wouldn't really recommend it, but it works. The door does open and close, and that's all that really matters. My gamer's grass is really micro scale, but it could be used as, a freshly mowed lawn grass, and that's what I'm working with here. I wish the grass was a little bit longer, but I don't have that option. I'm using Tuft Tac Glue to stick on that grass, and I'm using the Static King to apply the grass. Again, these are all optional things that you can get on the side. These are not part of the base material list. A mini library is not a mini library without books, and these have been sitting in my prop box for ages. I got these all at Michael's in the charm section, aka the jewelry making section really. They're the perfect scale, and the little steampunk books just need to have their little hook cut off, and now they're perfect for the little library. By the way, if you want to customize your own books, it's not that hard to do in Photoshop. Many hobbyists have actually made tutorials about it. Jennifer Buxton has a few posted in her blog, and there's actually a really great tutorial by fellow hobbyist and fellow YouTuber Linkhart. I'll post the link in the description box below. Desktop Staples actually created free-to-use files that are already miniaturized books that you can just print off and fold up. They include a lot of the classics like King of the Wind or Misty of Chincoteague. And of course, I'd even tried my hand at making my own. I'll have to create a different video to explain all this because I did create the album cover myself. After a few more added details, the little library is done. I learned a lot throughout this project. And one of the things I learned is that I need a new ruler and not use a meter stick for miniatures. But in all seriousness, this was a fun rainy day project. I hope you enjoyed the shenanigans, and if you want to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at SelectArcane or on Facebook by the same name. Thanks for watching! Bye!